Have you ever slept through the night and had a dream? And it started out well, but then towards the end of your dream, it started to become darker and scarier until it was a full-blown nightmare. No, this is not a horror video. This is the reality that most middle-class Americans are in right now. Now, just to get this out of the way, we're not talking about a popular wrestling dynasty when we're talking about the American dream and nightmare. This is just the reality of us Americans at the moment. And with rising living expenses and wages not increasing well enough to cover our living expenses and our needs, what has become of the American dream? Has inflation just literally snatched it away from us? What has happened to the strongest and richest middle class in the world? Inflation's at an all-time high. Jobs are not like what they used to be, especially with offshoring, and basic needs such as putting food on the table, affording gas, and heating our homes, they're now becoming tougher and tougher to do. And we're not even mentioning that healthcare in our country is one of the most expensive in the world. The middle class is also shrinking as more and more Americans are suffering from income inequality. Here are the top 10 reasons why the American dream is now a nightmare. Number 10, 44% of all workers aged 18 to 64 have low-wage jobs. Do you think you could make a good living with $15,000 to $20,000 a year? In today's market, that is for sure impossible. Now imagine how hard it would be to find a good paying job under these circumstances. Which brings me to number 9. The competition for good jobs is incredibly intense. Now we know that you guys watch the news or this channel, and you know that we've reported multiple times wherein the government has announced hundreds of thousands of job openings. But which of those jobs can afford a middle class lifestyle or even be considered middle class anymore? 23%. That's right. Only 23% of jobs available can be considered middle class. And to make things worse, employers are looking for candidates with several years of experience, the need for a graveyard shift or weekend hours, and also a willingness to be working in person. That first part though, that they're looking for people with experience, it makes me feel bad for people with no experience. I remember going through that. It's kind of like, okay, it's your first job. Everyone knows it's your first job, but yet you're somehow supposed to get this experience without having your first job yet. It's really weird. I mean, just imagine trying to apply for a government issued ID and then they ask you for an ID to confirm. It's like, wait, I'm here for an ID, so I don't yet have an ID. Yeah, it's not a really good cycle. Number 8, average gas prices in the country is making it difficult for most Americans to afford it. The problem at the gas pump existed long before Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. Although with that happening, it didn't help global supplies as sanctions were placed on Russia. Number 7, the notion that America's poor are not in a bad way is terribly mistaken. The poverty rate in our country is sitting at 17.8%. The poverty gap is 39.8%. This is insane. Number 6, there are a staggering amount of Americans who need government assistance just to get by each and every single month. 21.3% or more than 50 million individuals receive aid from the government in one form or another. Number 5, getting an education to hopefully get a good job is expensive too. Now with the average of public schools at more than $20,000, it's a wonder how people can still pay for this, or like most Americans, they just drown in student loan debt. Talking about debt, at number 4, we have medical debt. In terms of numbers, Americans owe $140 billion in medical debt. That's not a typo. That's with a letter B. Like, bruh, how are we gonna pay this off? And number 3, and in relation to that, 17% of all credit card debt is related to medical debt. Now, with about 1/3 of credit card holders having debt due to medical bills, with 60% of them citing that they had no other way to pay, it's really scary. Number 2, owning a home was a great asset for most middle class families, but at today's rates, it's becoming less and less of a good time to buy. Now, across the country, only about 250,000 houses can be considered affordable, especially for those who make anywhere between $75,000 to $100,000 a year. Far from that 656,000 that's reported before the pandemic began. And number 1, mortgage rates have risen so much that only 1 in 64 middle class families in the current real estate market can actually afford to buy a home. Affordable homes are becoming extinct, you guys. Now, if you guys watch The Internship starring Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson, there's a line from one of the interns. You see, Vaughn and Wilson, they played old school salesmen in this movie. But as the job market was meek, they tried their luck with Google. It was a tech company where they met young kids who were also vying for a job. Now, in one realistic scene, the situation for everyone in the country is shown. No matter how smart they were, no matter what kind of education they received, and how hard they worked. Quote, The whole American dream thing that you guys grew up on, that's all it is nowadays, a dream, end quote. Now, as painful as that might sound, well, the truth does hurt. To say that this should worry us is an understatement. There is no refuting data. The dream is now a nightmare. And so guys, that ends this episode. How'd you like this one? If you did like it, do give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate the support.